Welcome to BioBytes. Today we have Alex Oshmyansky with us, currently the CEO and founder at the Mark Cuban Cost Plus drug company. I think Alex is a special guest, somebody that's been a part of creating a public benefit corporation to manufacture and sell affordable medicines, radically reducing price of thousands of drugs for millions of customers. Some of many of Alex's awards, but the Dow Jones Market Watch 50 most influential people in the stock market 2023, 100 most influential companies, Time magazines in 2023, invited to multiple lectures, including the White House Roundtable, and just I think somebody that for our guests and our audience, which are top level executives and folks across the biotech and pharma world, I think a really interesting perspective, and excited to dive into your background, Alex, the areas that you've worked in, your growth, and what's led you to your entrepreneurship that you've had throughout today. So if you could start us off with a quick intro on your background and how you've got to where you are today and some of those career steps and moves you've made to begin with, that would be incredible.
Sure. So, short version, I am a diagnostic radiologist by training. So, got my medical degree from Duke University, did that currently with a DPhil at Oxford in applied mathematics. And yeah, then went on to complete my surgical internship at Brigham and Women's Hospital, pediatric radiology and general diagnostic radiology and fellowship at Johns Hopkins. Sort of the long story of my background. When I was training as a young kid, I was promising in math at the time, and I was being fast-tracked to what's called a high-energy particle physicist. So think like string theory, quantum field theory. And I remember with all the wisdom of like a 17-year-old, I remember looking at a copy of Nature, the scientific publication. And on the cover, it had some sort of article along the lines of string theorists discovered the universe may be a 26-dimensional soccer ball in its morphology. And I remember thinking, oh, so this isn't going anywhere. So I decided to, with all the wisdom of a teenager, like make a hard left turn. I decided to go into biochemistry and change my major at the time. I had started college when I was 13. I got my degree when I was 18. I went on to, I guess what would be called in the UK postgraduate. Here it's just graduate medical education. And yeah, just sort of went from there. And I was planning to be a research physician, do the traditional thing, run a lab, be a academic radiologist. But I got really annoyed, to say the least, during my training because, I saw many patients have bad healthcare outcomes here in the United States from being unable to afford their medications. I know it's not as much of an issue for you guys across the pond in the UK, but we had several patients have bad outcomes. I remember one weekend I was working with a pulmonologist on a research project, and two of his patients died over the same weekend. He had prescribed a drug called Bosentan, which at the time was a generic long off patent. It's meant to be for a condition called primary pulmonary artery hypertension. Hypertension specifically of the big blood vessels that come out of the heart and go for the lungs. At the time, the drug cost $10,000 for a month's supply, and they needed it urgently. And they were meant to apply to a nonprofit set up by the pharmaceutical company that made they got lost in the red tapes, and two patients died in the same weekend. I remember coming in infuriated. And you would think that'd be enough to get me, started on all this. Honestly, the sort of straw that broke the camel's back was, do you remember this character, Martin Shkreli, the so-called pharma bro?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it wasn't as big a thing internationally. He was sort of like 10 years ago now, sort of a social media kind of villain of the week type figure here in the U.S. He had jacked up the price of generic medication for, uncommon, an antibiotic for an uncommon atypical infection, pyrimethamine, generic Darafrin, from like $17 a tablet to $750 a tablet, and became had a particularly sort of histrionic personality, so he became sort of a villain on social media. And I got mad, just like a lot of people did, and decided with all due naivete at that point, why don't we just start a non-profit pharmaceutical company? We'll make the drugs, we'll sell them at cost, they'll be great. I got together with some infectious disease doctor friends of mine, and we did. We made a 501c3 nonprofit, and I went out for the better part of like 3.5 years trying to raise financing for that, and failed spectacularly. Did not raise a dime beyond what I put in myself. Eventually, I applied to Y Combinator, startup accelerator in Silicon Valley, because they periodically donated to nonprofit. I think they still do. They let in one or two nonprofits in each of their batches. And yeah, I went and I interviewed with their partnership. At the time, nobody knew what he was at the time, who he was at the time, but Sam Altman was actually the person that interviewed. And basically, what Sam said was, "Hey, we like what you're doing. We'd like to support it, but we don't think that you'll be able to raise enough money to get this off the ground as a nonprofit. If you reincorporate as a public benefit corporation, we'll invest in you like we would in any other company. A public benefit being a corporation being effectively a C corp in the United States, but one with a registered public mission with the state. So still a for-profit company, but one that's also judged against the metric of how well it achieves its registered public mission. So after 3-4 years of no success, I figured, why not? Let's give it a shot. And yeah, to Sam's credit, he was right. After going through YC, was able to raise, it's not a lot in pharma dollars, but a little over $1 million to get kicked up and off the ground. And yeah, a few months after that, I emailed Mark Cuban, who is well known in the U.S. I'm not sure as much internationally, but sort of a very sort of a Richard Branson type, public famous billionaire. Not really expecting to get a response here. But yeah, he replied within 5 minutes. Believe it or not, he reads all his public emails, mcuban@gmail.com. It's crazy. I have no idea how he does email. Like, I feel bad because I'm not that good at email, and he must get at least 1,000 times more emails than I do. I have no idea how he does it. But yeah, we got into a conversation, and he invested a small amount of money to start with, and yeah, obviously it got much more invested on several levels since then.
Alex, that's incredible. And I looked into your background, somewhat of a prodigy from very early on. I think you've been very humble in that intro. So thank you for that. That's really helpful. And then, disrupting an existing market with long-term industry players that have incentives to keep prices down, or sometimes even, increase those and raise those prices. It's not an easy journey. What challenges and opportunities did you face as you grew the company and went through this kind of cycle of purely coming in and changing what we know as a norm of a healthcare practice in the US?
Yeah. So, in the United States, we have this particularly convoluted drug supply chain. So it's well known in the US, we pay 2.5 times more on average for our drugs than any other developed first world country. And, the reasons for it are complex, they're multifactorial, but if you really want to break it down to what I personally view as the fundamental root cause is basically a series of complicated financial intermediaries that stand between the pharmaceutical company and the patient, each of which take an increasingly large chunk of the actual drug cost. There are drugs we have on our direct-to-consumer pharmacy platform that we sell for tens of dollars that if you got it through the convention, if you got it through your insurance, you would be asked as a co-payment to pay $3,000 or $4,000 for those same drugs. And that sounds hyperbolic, but we have like 20, 30 of these high-cost generic specialty medications, ultra high-cost generic medications, however you want to phrase it. Drugs like Bosentan, which I mentioned before. So imatinib, the tyrosine kinase inhibitor for chronic myelogenous leukemia. The site for a month's supply, you can get it for $30 from our site. The actual adjudicated cost through the big insurance companies in the United States. So not the fake list price, the actual negotiated price, the amount you'll be asked to, if you have a high deductible plan, actually be asked to pay out of pocket is $3,000 to $4,000 for that same month supply. So literally 100 times. And it's the exact same drug, the exact same manufacturer. And kind of how is that allowed to exist? And it's a cliche in startup world, right? Like, how do you get low prices? Well, we cut out the middlemen. But it just so happens in the pharmaceutical industry specifically, the extent of the markup by the middlemen is extraordinary. And I think just getting up and off the ground, very naively, I thought the bad guy would be pharma. I thought it'd be Martin Shkreli. Look at this, Weasley guy, like taking advantage of poor sick kids. And, nobody's an angel, but it very quickly became apparent that actually, particularly in generic pharma, but even in brand pharma, it's actually a very vibrant market. If anything, the prices that the generic companies are getting are too low to be sustainable. They actually like doing business with our company because we actually pay more
Mm,
than the big purchasing cartels. Like we're still a small company compared to, the big pharmacy benefit managers like CVS Caremark or Express Scripts. So
mm,
yeah, we're paying these same pharmaceutical companies more. We're just showing what we purchased it for. So the big starting hurdle turned out not, you know, capital. It was more convincing, other partner pharmaceutical companies that we're for real, like there's a potential market going for us because, the established supply chains are just so uh, entrenched in the US healthcare system. Like, that you'll get about 30 to 40% of the US market if you go through the established supply chain. So every pharmaceutical company bids to those same big three companies or so that dominate, U.S. healthcare and particularly pharmaceutical distribution. So convincing pharma companies that it wasn't a risk to, go outside those traditional channels that,
mm,
those distributors or really financial intermediaries need your drugs more than you need them as a financial intermediary. That was actually the hardest part of getting kicked up and off the ground. I thought it would be impossible to the point that I thought we'd have to make our own drugs. True to the initial vision of Mark Cuban Cost drug company, we are a manufacturer. Across the street from where I'm sitting, we have our sterile fill finish facility, which we stood up and qualified earlier this year, now selling our first products. Now it's very focused on the products we're not able to source from anyone else. So primarily shortage drug products, think
mm,
pediatric chemotherapy, ICU medications, electrolytes. I like to say we make the products nobody else wants to make. But in terms of uh, what our core business is that most people know us for, reducing the cost of these drugs dramatically, it was really forging the relationships with existing pharmaceutical companies and convincing them to sort of be the first one to jump into the pool. Like, hey, there's not really going to be substantial retaliation if you do this. And yeah, we had three companies when we launched that. Was able to convince three big generic manufacturers to give it a shot, and yeah, they had a very good experience. And now pretty much every big generic manufacturer in the world, pretty much all of the top 50 generic manufacturers now sell through our platform to, as you were saying, now millions of customers.
mm. That's incredible. And then at that point, when you were trying to go about shifting the industry, right, and sharing with folks that, hey, look, yes, there's a risk and there's a gamble, but we are a player to partner with. How did you overcome that piece? Because that's not easy, right? I mean, that in principle, it sounds correct, but to actually get them to go ahead with it, that's not an easy thing to do. So, what were some of the strategies, Alex? How did you go about getting that done?
Yeah, a lot of it was sort of meeting them where they were. So even
Mm,
before that, first three big generic manufacturers, we were able to convince them to partner with us. We partnered with an even smaller manufacturer on one single product, and they didn't want to be publicly acknowledged to be working with us because risk blowback from the big purchasing cartels. So
mm,
we actually took their product and put our own label on it. So that's still the only product we've technically manufactured, virtual manufacturers on
mm,
that product under our own label for the retail market. Now we actually do manufacture products for the hospital market, but yeah, it took about a year to get all our state licenses to be allowed to do that in the U.S. Common
mm,
misconception: you don't just need a FDA approval to market drugs in the U.S. You actually need 50 state approvals, which takes forever. So we had to build out all of that infrastructure, organize third-party logistics organizations, structured product labels, work with a CDMO, to fill bottles of tablets for us of that first product, albendazole, an antiparasitic medication. Again, one of these ultra high-cost specialty generic
mm,
drugs. And yeah, we launched that product in I want to say early 2021, and yeah, that was quite successful. We wound up selling it to a lot of refugee care centers in the United States because previously they were paying $200 a tablet
mm,
for this drug, which is insane because an antiparasitic is primarily used to treat the indigent, so particularly sort of vicious in its pricing. But yeah, we were able to bring that cost down, I think, over time to like $5 a tablet. So still not great, but substantially
Mm.
less expensive. And yeah, once that pharmaceutical company had a good experience, we were able to use that to convince three other companies to launch 100 products. Again, trying to keep their identities as confidential as possible. I think Neil was the only one who was willing to go public with us at the time, and because they were so upset at the purchasing cartel, they're like, we kind of want to show them what for. But yeah, and after that was successful, yeah, the rest of the generic industry sort of piled on, and now we have, I think, over 2,500 products. So pretty much a full portfolio of every generic product you could want is available at a true transparent cost through our site. And with that, we've moved on to the next phase of partnering with true biotech companies, true big pharma, and have about 20 branded, patented medications as well going around the purchasing cartels. And yeah, hopefully we'll expand that portfolio dramatically by the end of the year.
That's incredible. And so I guess there was this proof of concept. Here's the proof in the pudding, it works, and then you start to build on that, right? And even now, I can hear the kind of passion for getting into the bigger pharma brands and continue to grow and scale. During this period of time, yeah, again, I imagine there were tons of obstacles to overcome. I mean, how did you go about assembling the right team, the right, kind of unit and board team to go and attack and get this done? Because again, I mean, you've got the vision, you've had a lot of the I think the CEO seat, right, of articulating that image, bringing in amazing investors, and having a phenomenal brand. How did you go about assembling that unit to go and conquer this mission?
Yeah, so for the longest time, everyone, because we did have other investors than Mark to begin with, and all the other investors, except for Mark, who's a
Hmm.
true, an actual entrepreneur in and of himself. He started businesses before, thought this was crazy, but it was pretty much just me for the first 4 years or so, 3, 4 years of the company. So yeah, tried to keep the team as lean as possible. I eventually, another individual I recruited just through an open call on LinkedIn, David Chen, joined as the first employee, and he's a beast. He's just like a workaholic, amazing logistician. Now our chief supply chain officer, so manages a lot of this stuff. But yeah, really, I think we are fortunate in a position of our funding that we still have a very lean team. It's only 60 employees at this point. And yeah, what I think you see in a lot of venture capital backed companies is there's a lot of pressure from from your investors, particularly institutional VCs, to hire very quickly. Sort of out of
Hmm.
fashion now, but certainly, before and during the pandemic, you wanted to hire so they could show their limited partners as a growth metric. Look, this company has, 2,000 employees. It has 3,000 employees. It's growing its headcount, 10% month over month as a, sort of vanity metric in lieu of, profitability, while growth at all costs was fashionable, which of course is a potential long-term disaster. Going from someone who's getting, we're very, very fortunate in Mark's dedication to the company because he's able to be much more strategic with his investments because it's his own money, and just say, no, let's keep the team as lean as it can be. But in terms of once the company did blow up and we're justified, like, oh, okay, now we do need to get more people. We started growing the team in a meaningful way about 2.5 years ago. And there, we're largely remote as an organization. We're headquartered in Dallas, Texas, and our core manufacturing division is obviously not remote. That's located, recruited here, and that's about 40 of the 60 people. But the people that run all of our direct-to-consumer initiatives, our benefits initiatives, they're distributed across the country. And I think I just stalked people on the internet and was, like, oh, you seem to be a real thought leader in this space, and just slowly picked people off, like over a
Yeah.
period of months, and talked them into coming on board. So yeah, no, I think we have a great team of people who are not just leaders in their field, but also very passionate about the mission of the organization, very driven by making sure that the mission of what we're doing gets accomplished.
And what's that experience like working with Mark Cuban? He, as you mentioned, he puts his own money up. He's clearly invested, and it seems like he invests in things he believes in, right? It's got to be something that he is passionate about. So, what's that experience been like from your side, Alex, working with Mark Cuban on something like this?
he's a manic workaholic. Like I've never seen anything like it. I like to think of myself as a hard worker, but yeah, I think in like 6 years of working together now, it's never taken him more than I want to say like an hour to get back to an email anytime, day or night. Like you can
Wow.
tell how he got where he is in life. Like he never turns it off, and his attention to detail where he is, because obviously at his stage, like he doesn't have to be doing any of this. He doesn't have to be actually when he gets customer service complaints to his personal Twitter, he investigates the individual customer service complaints. He does not need to be doing that as long billionaire multiple times over. But you
Mm.
really see what it takes is as an operator to really accomplish your goals is you've got to be in deep in the weeds and really managing the operational detail to make sure you succeed at the level you want to.
And that's so interesting. You think about the success that you've had with the company, having someone like Mark be an investor and work with you strategically. I mean, that's so valuable along this journey that you've been on and continuing to go on, right?
Yeah,
So no,
and
that's
perhaps one of the most valuable things is just Mark putting his reputation on the line.
Mhm.
As I mentioned, a lot of this is just convincing pharmaceutical companies to work with us. And the fact that, it's not just Alex Oshmyansky, the radiologist from central Montana, has an idea. No, it's a name brand person is staking his reputation on it. That I think that really was one of the key things that helped us get over that initial activation energy of getting the partners we needed to really start the company.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, this isn't your first walk in entrepreneurship. And as started companies prior to this, I mean, what are you seeing as gaps in the current landscape that you would want to be a part of and address?
No, that's a great question. Yeah, so when I was in grad school, that was my first sort of experiment in entrepreneurship. During my PhD years, I remember the Said Business School at the University of Oxford had a business plan competition. Mostly entered by the MBA students there, but I had an idea for a door handle that dispensed waterless hand sanitizer when we used it.
Hmm.
Uh, ahead of its time. The idea was to keep me as a
Yeah.
doctor from forgetting to wash my hands when I went between patient rooms.
Yeah.
And I was like 20 years old at this point, and we wound up winning the business plan competition. And they
Amazing.
had sort of a Dragon's Den. I think they actually had one of the panelists from Dragon's Den. Like,
Wow.
yeah, I think it was Deborah Mead. See, is that her name?
Deborah?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, Deborah. Deborah's one of the core Dragon's Den members. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, yeah. She came as
Yeah.
a like celebrity guest judge to this
Yeah,
panel.
yeah,
So yeah,
yeah.
Dragon's Den, Shark Tank is a recurring theme in my life, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah, I was
Uh,
gonna say, is that what led you
yeah,
to email Mark Cuban, eh?
no, just weird coincidence.
Yeah,
Yeah, I know
yeah.
I think she's meant to be like this sort of Simon Cowell type, like bad guy figure on the show. Is that right?
Sometimes. I think
Yeah,
sometimes she's
yeah,
great. I think it depends on the product and the entrepreneur that walks in.
yeah. Because I remember being surprised because she was lovely. Like she was super nice
Yeah,
to everybody, and we were kind of the question was like, oh, I'm tactless, so I was like, oh, but you come off as sort of the heel of the show on the program on the episodes I've watched, and you're lovely. And she's like, yeah,
yeah,
they can edit it to make it look whatever way they want. Like,
yeah, yeah,
it's a 3 hour pitch. I'm gonna say something snooty at some point, and if they edit it together the right way, like I
yeah.
get that makes sense. But yeah, we wound up winning that, and we were meant to accept I think a small investment from the Said Business School, but actually it turned out there were wealthy individuals like looking for things to invest in the audience, and they wound up giving us better terms than Said did. So we wound up taking investment from them. And at the time, that just seemed like magical to like 20-year-old Alex. Like I figured entrepreneurship, like startups were, the same odds as joining the MBA. Like this is not a thing that happened to normal people. Turns out, yeah, no, I was wrong. You can come up with an idea and get investors if you do the right thing. So yeah, I learned a lot in that initial company. It wound up operating for I think like 14 years.
Wow.
And I wound up leaving to go back, finish my medical studies. I was the founding CEO, but then took a step back, was sort of a part-time CFO during while I was in med school, and then obviously pared back even further once I had to do my medical training. But yeah, it was learned a lot of good lessons about entrepreneurship. And back then, this shows how old I am. And it was before Mark Zuckerberg made like young founders very fashionable. Like Mark Zuckerberg and I are the same age. That's really sad. But at the time, the popular thing was, you started a company, you made the initial product, and then you passed it off to gray-haired investor or gray-haired operators to actually make the company a big thing, which was a condition of our initial investment. And wound up taking that, but learned a lot of good lessons. We had 5 co-founders of that company, which was too many. That's too much to manage. So lots of good stuff learned there. And to your question about kind of what the gaps are in the marketplace now, I think it's really solutions for other biotechnology companies to access the market without interaction with these large purchasing conglomerates. And what I mean by that is it's virtually impossible. We do talk to smaller pharmaceutical companies who are nearing the end of their development cycle, talk to biotechnology companies, and it's virtually impossible for almost any of them to enter the market without partnering or being bought by one of the big pharmaceutical companies. And that's because those companies have the apparatus not just to market their product, but also the apparatus to contract with the payers in the United States to actually sell that product. It's almost a niche form of investment banking, like how to structure the deals between pharma and the big Swiss group purchasing organizations that actually circle around and sell back to the United States. It's a whole mess. Providing an access to a way to access the market without going through this extraordinarily convoluted apparatus, by which point, the initial cost of your product will be magnified dramatically to the actual end consumer, while leaving a lot of the value that the pharma company itself should have taken as the innovators of the product on the table. One of the criticisms we get a lot is, you're reducing drug costs. Doesn't that reduce, the amount of money available for innovation, for research and development? And I would argue just the opposite. Like, so much money is the money we take off the table is being left off the table of the intermediaries. The pharma companies actually get paid more through our model. Like, there's more money available for research and development. And, I talked to the CEOs of large pharma companies, both branded and generic. And, I remember speaking specifically to a generic company, and he was like, yeah, I get death threats in the mail. Like, a patient was like, hey, it cost me $100 just in co-payment for this medicine I need to live. How do you sleep at night? And I'm like, I sold that drug for $1. Like, by the time it just reaches the consumer, it's $100. I was talking to the head of a big branded company, and they were saying, we do all the research and development. We take all the legal liability. We take all the bad flack from the public writ large. Like, senators are yelling at us on the floors of Congress. But why does Express Scripts get 30 to 50%? Like, that's crazy. And no one knows who they are or what they do because they don't really do much. So, filling that gap of trying to connect the actual pharmaceutical company with the market is kind of where we're trying to fit in and provide an opportunity for innovative companies to access the market without having to give up, more than half of their potential income through these intermediary channels.
Really interesting stuff. And what sets Mark Cuban's Cost Plus apart from other players in the industry that might be targeting something similar when they're also trying to potentially decrease prices to go after a similar type of model that you guys are going after?
Yeah, so, I think one of Mark's favorite sayings is we don't actually sell pharmaceuticals, we sell trust. So, what we do, if you go to costplusdrugs.com, you can actually see the price we pay for the medications. Then we add a flat 15% markup, $5 fee to pay our pharmacist, $5 shipping and handling, and that's the total cost of the drugs. You'll see all of the big PBMs have basically tried to copy what we're doing and create their own cost plus models. One of them even copied our color scheme on our webpage. Like, they tried to copy it. Imitation is the greatest form of flattery type of thing.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah.
But the key difference between what they're doing and what we're doing is we actually reveal the cost of cost plus. Like, what's the point of a cost plus model if you're unwilling to reveal what the cost of your products are? So, when, the big companies come out and say, hey, we also have a cost plus model. Like, great, what are your costs? No? So why are your product is everything twice as much if you go through you as compared to us? Like, you must be getting better prices than we are, certainly, right? Like we're a tiny company by your standards. Like, so, that's what I would say is like we're, trying to provide a source where patients can go to, and it's a fragile thing, but it's something we work very hard to maintain, is that aspect that we can be a trusted source where patients can go to and know they're not getting ripped off by going through us.
And and what would you share with people who are more junior in the industry or, have plans of disrupting the market in their own spaces, much like you did years ago, and currently still doing? I mean, in terms of advice on how to bring their ideas to light and find investors, I mean, you found some incredible investors, Mark Cuban being a key one. I mean, what advice would you give to people who are looking to disrupt industries and this industry moving forward?
Yeah, a lot of it sounds very cliche, but it's cliche because it's true. It's all about execution. Ideas are very cheap. Everybody has a million ideas, but waking up every day, creating a to-do list, and just going through the to-do list every day, making progress every single day. That's what it's really all about, and not being about doing anything. I tell this story. When the company first started, we first got a building. The grass was too tall outside the building, and we were going to get fined by the city. And, I lived in an apartment at the time, so I didn't have a lawnmower, but I went out and I rented a lawnmower as Alex, the co-founder with 2 doctorates, and, mowed the grass. And, that's just the kind of like stuff you've got to be doing
Love it.
especially
Yeah.
in the early days. And you're going to get a ton of no's, before I got a yes from, Mark Cuban, which enabled the whole thing, or even, the other investors who invested, part of that initial $1 million seed round. There were literally thousands of no's. Part of that is pitching in front of, I count that part of it as pitching in front of audiences and people not following up. But I took literally hundreds of, one-on-one meetings, coffee. Zoom wasn't really as much of a thing back in 2018 when I was getting this all up and running. So literally I moved to the Bay just to take meetings and just went from meeting to meeting to meeting. And yeah, there's a very low success rate. And you just got to get comfortable with people laughing at you, people saying no to your face. Like I have crazy stories of these early day pitch meetings and just like bizarre responses that you're getting. And you just got to shake it off. And if you believe in what you're doing, just keep pushing forward.
Yeah, I love that advice. And something that I try and think about often is most successful people are just okay with dealing with more highs and lows than the average person. And I think that's so important. Anytime you go through a high or a low, I think it's always good to stay grounded because that's part of this journey and part of being successful. You just got to take the roller coaster as it comes. So no, I really enjoyed this, Alex. And I want to say thank you so much for coming on BioBytes today. I have no doubt there's loads of gems and really interesting perspectives there for our audience and listeners. So thank you so much, Alex. You've genuinely been a joy to have on here.
Oh, thank you so much. Really enjoyed the experience. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you, Alex.